All right. So, good evening, everyone. Super happy to be on stage tonight and to launch this series of talk. The subject I will talk about tonight is something I've been working on for many years, and I think every CTO out there has been kind of working on the same kind of things. So, just out of curiosity, so I know some faces, and I know that you have already big teams. Who is an aspiring CTO? Aspiring. Want to be a CTO in the coming months. Higher, I don't see you. Okay. Who has a team already or is working okay. Okay, less than 10 people? More than 10 people? Okay. So well distributed. Huh? Just to give you a brief introduction of what I do and where I come from. So I work at Side. So Side is a marketplace which was founded in August 2015. So it's been a few years already. We are connecting temp workers with companies. So before we were, for instance, on a freelance model, but now we are using the infamous interim model. And our objective is to abstract as much as we can all the complexity related to work. So in a few words, it's you are a sider, so you want to work flexibly. You have a vacancy, for instance, tomorrow morning. You go on the app, you select a task that you want to do, and then you're selected. You work and you get paid super easily without you having to go to an agency, sign contract, and so on. We do the same for the company to give them the possibility to, in just a few clicks, to increase their workforce. And the idea would be to be some kind of AWS of the flexible work. So just in a matter of few clicks, you can increase or decrease your workforce, or you can decrease your money you get on side, the skills you get, and so on. We are in a bit everywhere in France, so 14 cities. We have more than 100 employees and 30 people in product. What's interesting is product has been the first team to be built at Side. Before we had sales, before we had operational, we had a product team. I gave you a few technos that we are using, but it's not really relevant for tonight. About me, so as Vlad said, I'm a CTPO. I'm, to be honest, more CPO today than CTO. But before, I was the only developer in the team. There were 4 of us, 3 people from business school, and me. And I was doing backend. I was trying to do front end. It was not really a success, as you will see with the slides. So I started like this. And then, bit by bit, I had to hire people. I had to organize a team. I had to continue coding. Then I discovered that I was a bottleneck, and so on. My responsibility today is to make sure that what we do in the product is aligned with what we want to do in the business and with the vision. So you have, where you want to be in 2 years, and you also have the reality that is that you need to grow month after month, or otherwise you have an issue. And it means a lot of meetings, it means a lot of hiring, it means a lot of management, and it means way less code. So, when you want to explain the product, I guess every one of you has had these kind of questions. So, for instance, when you're talking with a field developer, am I being more than an executant? Because you get technical specs, you have to execute against it, and you don't really know what's happening after that. When you're talking to salespeople, do you people in product understand what's happening on the field? So you've got this communication issue. I think my preferred one is why do you need so much time to build just a button? So I think we all had this button effect in our life. And when you think about this, the main reason for this is because the product is usually a black box. It means that it's a technical thing with many parameters to take into consideration, and it's super complicated for external people to understand what's happening, and it's also super complicated because of the focus that you need for internal people to understand why they are executing against it. So, the product black box, how can you communicate with your CEO, your investors, your employees, your salespeople, your customers? So this has been like a challenge for me over the years, and I'm going to give you a few tips. So there will be a lot of few tips, and we can discuss this afterwards, but don't hesitate to ask all the questions that you have after. So when you think about the black box, there is two main questions. The first is, okay, how can I bring the context of the company and the business and the vision to my team? So inside the black box, we are actually, we know what we are doing. And this allows you to have driven people. It allows you to develop features that make sense. And it allows you also to have people that think about the future and not only about what they have to do in the visual of whatever feature. And then, how do you communicate externally? You may have like the best execution in the world, you may have the best contextualized people in your team, but if you're not able to communicate this to the outside world, you'll always face the same question, which is, okay, but what have you been doing like for 3 months? Why do we need 2 other months to do these things? And when do you realize that product is costing a lot? So my first tip, if we go for the first question, is whatever your position, your step, you should ask yourself about the roles. So everyone, how many of you have already a PM team? Okay, so all the others, you don't have a PM around you. What's interesting is often we hear, for instance, a product manager, product owner, QA, data engineers, and these kind of roles, when you're at the beginning, won't make much sense, because actually you're full, and so you won't name yourself PM because you're actually doing PM, PO, and all these things at the same time. But it's important from the very beginning to map the roles that you have, and then bit by bit, when this role becomes more and more important, to have people doing them, because you won't, as you scale, you won't have, for instance, a specific role that is being not addressed. My personal experience, for instance, is at the beginning, when we were 5 or 6, we didn't need product owning, and we didn't really need Agile or Scrum, and so we were just going as the flow go. And at some point, when we were 10, 15 in the team, we realized that we were losing a lot of time because we missed rituals, we missed communication, and we missed synchronization between the different team members. And if I had this reflex to, okay, who is doing what, and how is it going to be balanced afterwards, I think there would be some mistakes that I have done which would have been avoided. The other thing is about your execution flow. So you have a team and you have roles which are defined, but now you need also to bring some predictability to it. And execution flow is explaining to the people that work with you what's going to happen, what's going to be the pace, what's going to be the phase. So for instance, there is no rocket science into this, but outside, when every quarter, we built a roadmap. And the roadmap, we have something that happens all the time, which is field discovery. It's you, if you don't have PM or product managers going on the field, getting feedback from the client, asking questions to sales, to operations, to get a first intuitions. And then you define problems, then you map them, you measure the impact, you do some anticipation, some projections in order to define return on investment. And then you define your roadmap for the 3 months, maybe 6 months, and so on. You have also velocity. So you have a roadmap, you have features that you're supposed to do, but since you have like feature after feature after feature, how can you track, monitor, and display how well you're performing against what you said you would be doing? And at Side, for instance, we have something which is called velocity. So here you see a graph of the velocity of a squad, the temp squad, because we switched to temp. And velocity will be just like an automatic monitoring based on the boards. We plug ourselves on the Asana dashboard, and we get like a task at the beginning, task at the end, how many hours have been committed, how many hours have been delivered, and then based on that, we calculate this. And then this, we give it back to the team, so everyone can analyze what's been happening and can work on their anticipation skills. I give you a small example. For instance, one day we had 20% velocity for all the mobile developers. And what happened? The backend guy had a big bug to fix, which took him most of his week. So he couldn't work on the data layer, the backend for the mobile, so he was the bottleneck. And these kind of things, they happen a lot. And especially when you grow, at the beginning when you're seeing yourself, you can act on it, but when you start growing, this kind of thing can happen more and more and silently. And having this kind of trackers, having this kind of monitoring will help you to see it and then act on it. And when you see a deviation, which can be positive or negative, you can see, okay, here is the best practice that I want to spread to the team, or here is the thing I don't want to reproduce again. And this is something opinionated, so it doesn't work everywhere. You need like a good marketing. You need to. This is not used for performance reviews, for instance. So you need some communication around this. The main point there is when you want to communicate with your team internally and even externally, you need some like simple metrics to show if something is going good or not. So we have velocity, we also have quality and bug occurrences, and this is the kind of thing that then you can give to your team so they can act week after week and improve their execution. You have a matter of org chart. So how many of you are familiar with org chart? Like, have you built one? Okay, do you know what it is? All right, it's something again a bit stupid. So there is no rocket science, but it's just to think about your organization. And I was talking just before about like the different roles that you can have in your team. But when you're a small group and when you start growing, you will meet bottlenecks. And because we are doing product, we know that if you want to do, for instance, your front end, you need the back end. If you want to do the back end, you need the technical spec. If you want the technical spec, you need the functional spec. If you want the functional spec, you need the intermission. If you want the intermission, you need the... So we have like many interdependencies. And as you grow, if you have like a node which is underrepresented, then you have a bottleneck with this node, and potentially you are impacting your whole organization and your whole efficiency. So, like, this is the organization that we have aside. So I'm handling the whole product, but I'm helped by a head of product who will be doing the management and the improvement of the execution for product managers and designers. I have a head of engineering who will do the same for engineers, and I have a head of delivery who will be focusing on making sure that we have the best execution possible. The last but not least, actually it's not the last, it's about the vision and the business. So at the beginning, when you are when there are just a few of you, it's easy to get a feeling of what's happening with the clients, with your users. How many of you have already been in to like a client meeting? Oh, nice. So it took me a bit of time, to be honest. But when you want to have a good impact on your team, it means that you need to give your team the context. And to give the context, you can use data, but you also need to give, to use examples. You need to share an experience that you had. So you need to go to meetings. And actually, it's not only you, it's also your team that needs to go to meeting. So for instance, at Side, we have product managers that regularly go to client meetings with sales, and sometimes that even replace sales going to these meetings. You want your team to interact with end users. And so you cannot ask all your developers or all your team just like to go and meet the users. You have some tricks. For instance, at Side we use customer support. We have someone we have a team who's handling customer support. But every time that we have a discussion around feature, bug, or whatsoever, we have someone in the team who will take it and who will respond to it. And it's something that is really cool because when you're doing backend, you will actually know that if you made a mistake somewhere, it has an impact on someone. When you are doing like a super cool feature, it's super cool to have the feedback directly from the client that, okay, it changed completely my experience. It's awesome. Thank you, guys. So you want your team, your people to interact, to know like what's happening outside of the product. You should never assume that because you know something, your team know it. And that is an issue which is super easy to get into, to fall into. I think it may be the most important one because it's the most devious one. So you think that because you heard some stuff and because you were like part of some discussion, because you were part in some meetings, that everyone around you understands the context. Why do we need to push so hard on this feature? Why do we need to deploy it on Friday? It's a Friday. Why do we deploy on Friday? This kind of thing. If you don't give the context, they won't understand and they won't execute. And your role is to give them all the explanations so they can take part into this decision. And then as a team, you face it. So you need to repeat it. You should not think that because you had like a weekly presentation or because you sent an email, people will understand or will remember. I had again the case today of one like super good developer that we have in the team. He's been here for 2 or 3 weeks. It's been 2 times he heard a specific keyword that he didn't understand and he never asked what it was. So, like, not assuming that people know what you know is something like which is really important. And when there are like key things that you want to convey, you repeat them like over and over again. And there is a saying that if you're not sick of saying one thing, then it means that you haven't said it enough. And then, last but not least, for this list, all the features need context. How many of you have developed a feature that actually was not exactly what it was supposed to be? Everyone, no? Please. So, yeah, you have something in mind and you see the V0, the V1, the V2, but because you didn't give the context, like when like the person in charge of like doing the technical spec, functional spec, won't see it and will, for instance, attach like a business logic to one object instead of the other. And then you see it and you say, but why are you doing this based on this when actually I needed more like granularity in this feature? For instance, at Side, we are sending a SMS before the first shift of every task. So a task has shift. A shift is like a client meet a Sider at one place, one moment. So you can have like you can work on Monday to Tuesday and so on. So Monday would be the first shift. But because the developer didn't have the context, he attached the SMS to the task and not to the shift, which means that the day we want to have this SMS sent for every shift before it starts, we cannot because it's attached to the task. So this is the kind of stupid thing that can happen when you don't attach context to what people do. And this is very important, because if you fail to communicate this, you are building things that are not aligned with the business. And since the product doesn't sell itself, if you have a feature that is not doing what it's supposed to do, it means that you cannot sell it, and it means that it's like just money wasted. Like a 2-month feature for 2 developers, given that the developer can be like 7, 8K per month, it's like a 32K waste of money. So this is just a few tips. Like most of them are common sense, to be honest. But what is difficult with common sense is that you need discipline to have it. So when you're talking about vision, when you're like making sure that your team is projecting, understanding where we want to be in 6 months, trying to understand what could be the next killing feature, trying to understand what could be the research and development they could do to have a new edge on the market, you need to do it regularly. You need to do all these little things all the time to make sure that everyone has the best context to operate the best. And you need to give them a framework of the execution, so they know that there is a discovery phase during which you do research and development, and then an execution phase where everything should be super rigorous. And that when you're doing a code, you document before, you do tests, and so on. Then, if we go to the second phase, so how do you address communication with external people, and especially people that are not technical? Could you raise again your hand? I'm sorry, I'm making you contribute a lot, but did any one of you had issue to explain what was happening in the product to CEO, investors? Okay, and did you fix it? Is it something that is working now, or no, more or less? So yeah, it's a tricky part, especially at the beginning, because things are not super defined. But I would say that the first thing, like the big learning that I had over the years, is to be pragmatic, and that yes or like no, people don't read the documentation. So it's not because that you put like a magnificent article in Notion somewhere, or that you represented your roadmap with super detailed, or you had a Gantt on a internal IP address, that actually the people outside of the product will go there and will watch and read and learn and ask questions if they have. What will happen is in the next meeting, in the next executive committee, you will be asked, but Hugo, what's happening in the next 2 months? I don't understand. I have no visibility on what's happening. So this happens a lot, and it's normal because everyone has its focus. And there are some tricks to try to prevent it as much as possible. So building a roadmap is the first trick. But as you might know, building a roadmap is not quite easy, especially when you say that you will do something in 3 weeks and actually it's taking more like 2 months. So then you need to trick your way a bit around the roadmap. You need to talk, like use images. You need to say that, okay, we're doing things in this priority. And when something happens, you actually need to be proactive in the fact that it's taking a bit more time than anticipated for this and these reasons. But if you have a good execution flow, you can deliver a good roadmap. And what happened, for instance, with the velocity that we have, with the quality check, and with all the documentation that we do, like 80% of our roadmap are delivered like quarter after quarter, which means that it's a good thing to communicate to your executive committee. You need to train teams. So there is this assumption that because you have a good product, I'll just check the time. Okay, I'll go quick. Because you have a good product, it will sell by itself. But the reality is not, it's not. And actually, when you're building features, when you're building your vision, and when you're really constructing foundations of what should be your product, what will be your product, you need to bring other people along. So we had this example of one day we designed for the Cider application the onboarding funnel. So we made like a super nice onboarding, and we had steps in this onboarding where like Ciders had to put their availabilities. It makes sense, like availabilities when you're having a marketplace, it's a good thing to know. But actually, it took us like 2 months, and because we didn't push this to the other teams, this feature was never used. So we actually invested 2 months in something that was actually pretty cool, but it was never used by the operation team to actually understand where the what kind of was it part-time, full-time, what kind of thing the Ciders were expecting. So now every time we have a feature, we do trainings, and trainings is not only just showing what's happening because people forget, it's showing them how they can perform better with what we brought. So like the best example is if you have your sales team not using your product, not knowing your product, you have an issue. So what you do is you take your product step by step, you explain it to your sales team, and you explain them, okay, with this feature, you will be able to explain to your client why Cide has like a better quality supply. With this feature, you can explain why the Ciders will come on time. With this feature, you will explain them that they can do this like 24/7. And this, you need to be really didactic to every, to your sales, to your operation, and to your management team outside of the product. You need to repeat yourself again. You need to be, to do a bit of marketing. So like use GIFs, use like colors, and like make it nice to see, because otherwise it's just like one email drawn in like many others. You need to sell it. If you want to train people, if you want to have these people sell your product, you need to sell your product. So when you do this when you go to client meetings, but you also do this when you are explaining when you are using having this roadmap to your CEO, I don't know, you need this feature to your sales team, and so on. So like selling what like the features is something which is really key if you want the people to understand and actually to trust you. You need to keep it simple, and then like you have tricks such as like newsletters and so on. Like newsletter or something like really cool, really entertaining. If you have like a good content, like a good product marketing manager, so someone who can like do nice GIF and nice sentences and so on, you can actually spread the product knowledge across the company pretty easily. This is, for instance, an example of a Cide product newsletter. So we send it every week on Friday. It's in English, but we have GIFs, we have like things that explain what did we do, why is it cool, and when it will happen, and so on. And then the last part, you had over communication, so you need to be like super present with the others, and then you need to think a lot. And thinking is when you're actually building the roadmap, you need to build this roadmap against others' plan. So for instance, if the sales team is tackling the SMB market and you're building features for enterprises, you have an issue. So you will need to understand like every business unit manager, what they plan to do in the coming 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and you actually need to understand if you have this target for the end of the year of revenue, for instance, how do you plan as a company to reach it? You need to do user interviews. You need to use all the data that is available. It could be through a business intelligence. It can be on Salesforce, whatever. But you need to understand what's happening in the numbers in the company. Then you have a strat plan. So you have different paces. You can be month after month. You can be quarter after quarter. You can have like a roadmap for 1 year. You have different forms for different steps. But you need to have a pace. When at some point you stop rushing, you reflect on what you've done, and then you adjust the trajectory that you wanted to take. And the last thing is building a protocol, like a communication protocol. So building a communication protocol is giving the others a way to communicate with you and to know how you will respond to them and how it will be after that. So for instance, for my one-on-one, so with my reports, with my CEO, with my COMEX, we use Asana. We have a private project on Asana, and every time we have something like an update to do, ask to ask, we put a line on Asana. And everyone in the company knows that I'm a fanatic of Asana, and everyone knows that you bring like a line in a one-on-one, then I won't wait for the next one-on-one to talk about it. I will ping other people to understand what's happening, and super quickly I will be reacting on something that could be urgent. So people don't reach me on Slack, they don't reach me by email, they know that Asana will be the best for this. So like I gave this is like a screenshot of one of the Asana, like it was one line between two people at the beginning in a one-on-one, and you see it became like six people collaborating on this, and then we killed this issue, which is like just, it was a data engineering thing to do some synchronization between the data warehouse and Salesforce. And with these little tricks, so like communicating a lot, doing all the synchronization that you can, making sure that everyone understands, managing from A to Z your product, from the moment you try to pitch it to the moment you actually see it sold by your sales, you will have like a transparent execution and impact of your team. And then you will build trust. And by building trust, then you will have like more freedom, you will have less reporting to do, and you will be more impactful. That's it. Thank you.
Who has a question for Hugo? Okay, so I throw the mic to you, and then you throw it to the next one. It's super soft, so don't worry, you can throw it easily. Okay, you start.
Okay, thank you for the talk. I just have a quick question about the org chart you show. How many people do you have in each team? Is it equally distributed, or there is a big dev team and a small product team? How it works?
We have 5 product managers, 2 designers, around 16 developers, which can be like who can be Android developer, iOS, backend, frontend, 2 data engineers, and 1 dev care and 1 PO. So not exactly equally distributed, but we have like ratios, so we know that it makes sense.
Okay, thanks. And do you have a specific organization to work on feature, like a feature team or something like that, or or people are working by teams?
The squad question?
Yeah, exactly, the squad question.
So like everyone else, we try to do squads. And we have squad in the sense that we have like some kind of specialty for like different groups. But then these groups, like you can have changes of team members. But like because of the business, for instance, we know that for Siders, it's a mobile application. So quite naturally, you will have like mobile developers in it, and you will have a bit of backend. And you will have someone who knows well the mobile backend API, and so like kind of naturally they will be like a lot together. But we didn't design this as just to follow the squads and to have like a full autonomy on this. It was more like ad hoc, like based on the roadmap, how could we see? What we did though is every time we go on a roadmap, we don't want to go like do like everything at the same time. We want to have like a few angles, like 2 angles that we want to tackle. And for instance, we did the switch for temp. So we had a squad fully on temp switch, and we wanted to work on the qualifications, for instance, and we had another squad which had all these projects related to this. It's more like a matter of clarity of execution than just like following the squad philosophy at the beginning.
Hey Hugo, thank you for the talk. It's more a product question, but you talked about roadmap and communication to the rest of the team. What does your roadmap look like when the piece of thing you're communicating with the rest of the company to align people? We know that there's uncertainty in building products, so you can commit for like, or I don't know, maybe, but usually it's hard to commit for 3 months on things that will be pushed out because there's uncertainty and stuff you don't know yet when it's the start of the quarter. So what level are you communicating with the rest of the team? And is it commitment on features or commitment on objectives or commitment on like strategy axis? What is it?
So every quarter we change. And we don't change because we want to change, we change because we have the context which is different. So for instance, at some point we were using the Basecamp 6-week roadmap, which was nice, and which was very agile. And then we started, we knew the kind of feature that we wanted to do, and we had like a mature enough team that when they were saying like, okay, it's going to take 3 weeks, it was actually taking 3 weeks. So we had like, for instance, like rolling not really precise roadmap. Then we had like super precise roadmap, like week after week, and it was working. And then, for instance, we switched to temp. And with temp, since you're moving from something with no rules to French labor law, there were many like unknown. And like, for instance, for Q4, I said, okay, guys, I cannot tell you what feature is going to be released when. I used like a stupid image which was like a pile of plates and saying that, okay, we have 2 main pile of plates and we are going to take the one on top, and sometimes the one in the middle will be switched to the top and will be just like decreasing the number of plates like one by one. And for Q1 will be a mix between, we'll have a mix between the two. It's really depending on the context and, as you say, like how much, like what is the part of unknown in what you want to do. I think
I was wondering what brought your role to change over time in your company when you went from CTO to CTPO.
CTPO, yeah. So what were my different roles, or?
No, what happened that made this change happen? You said you were a bottleneck at one point. I think that's what you said, or something like that.
So what happened? So yeah, you have different kind of CTOs. It's true, and you have different definitions of CTOs. Sometimes for some it's VP of engineering, some head of engineering, some like it's not so precise. But what happened to me is like it was just a matter of things I liked. When you're building your company, you can actually choose people to help you, and by choosing the right people, then you go to the direction that you like. And I knew I love tech, and I was like super curious to try to apply like tech patterns to business cases. For instance, like taking object-oriented programmation to like the way you build product when you have different layers of companies. So, and at the same time, like I found the same kind of beauty in trying to build a team rather than building the product. So it was kind of natural to me. And I also liked very much to be challenged. I like to learn every day. And since when you are a backend developer and you start managing designers, there is a bit of a leap that I jumped. So yeah, it was always a matter of next step. Okay, what could I do? What could be cool next? And for instance, my last jump was to go way more often in client meetings and to actually do sales with sales. So trying to understand this A to Z experience from the moment you have the idea, really to scaling the sales of your product.
Hey, thanks for the talk. Can you develop on what are your different channels to communicate with your team? On the slides there were weekly team meetings, quarterly workshop, one-on-one. Can you develop?
So every team member has one-on-one at least once a week or once every 2 weeks when they are seniors. So we don't have people just working in the corner and we leave them there. So everyone has a follow-up, and we have a precise framework, management framework. So you could be managed by me or by Sad or by Julien. It would be the same. So we have a strong follow-up with one-on-one, and we always talk about, since we have so many trackers, we don't need to say, okay, what did you do last week? We can talk about people things, we can talk about next step, we can talk about trajectory. So this is the management thing that we pushed a lot. Then we have a weekly kickoff. So every week on Monday at 9:30, we do a small presentation of what happened in the business that week. And then we talk about the different discoveries that we did and what will be the main challenges for the week. And so I will be talking first for the business, and I will have my head of product talking about, focus group or discovery. And then I will have my PO describing the thing for every squad. And we do a catch-up also on past week, saying that, okay guys, there was an issue, we had this big crash which caused P0 past week, it's not good, and so on. So it's a bit of a sum up and a preview of the next week. And then the last thing that we do is every quarter we try to do workshops. We build the roadmap together. So we have a mix of bottom up and top down. And so if you want to do bottom up, you need to have a workshop with the team. And we are preparing Q1, so we had one with the tech team 2 weeks ago, and we split the tech team in 3 teams, and every team had to put on a post-it, okay, what is your vision of scale, what is your vision of the vision, and what is your vision of the growth. And then we mix everything together, we talk it through, and we build the roadmap like this.
And the weekly meetings, they come on top of all the Scrum ceremonies?
Yes, then you have all the Scrum. We don't do daily stand-ups. We kind of do them on Slack, but we have grooming, we have t-shirt sizing, we have a release day, which is Tuesday. We do this kind of thing.
So you were talking just earlier about how to communicate, how to involve the tech team in the product, how to build a roadmap. And I guess to build a roadmap with the product, with the dev team, you have to communicate all the stakes to the team. How do you do that? How do you, dip them in all the problematics and all the strategy?
So there are a few tricks. The first trick that we have is, I said, I'm taking care of the product team. And then I said product team is product management, design, tech, and data. And when you actually push it over again and again, in everyone's mind in the product team, when you ask a backend developer or a data engineer, which team are you from? They will say product. And I'm saying it's evident, but for instance, before we had the data outside of the product, and it took to the data people a bit of time to and a lot of corrections before they actually really felt part of the product. Then we do a lot of team events. We went together, for instance, in one of the team members' family house in the south together. We have a strong connection between different expertise. We do the customer support, and actually it's only the tech people that do the customer support and not the product managers and designers. So like there is a strong connection within the team, and there is a strong connection with the impact of what we do with the users. So, for instance, if we have a delay in the payment of the siders, we'll see like 150 tickets happening on Intercom, and it will be us doing it. So, when you do all these small pushes, and you give again and again the contact, and when you organize events, naturally you will have people really taking care of the users and then the product for these users.
Thanks for the talk. Is your team allowed to work remotely? And if yes, how do you manage it? And how do you, what is your vision about it?
To work remotely?
Yeah.
So, yes. And actually, nowadays, there are a lot of remote people. So yeah, I have actually a few full remote people. We have a few rules, but they are not really different from what they would have in the office. Meaning that if you need to go to, I don't know, an appointment, you go to your appointment. But you need to be reachable. You need to have predictability when you do your things. So yeah, we have remote people. They can take remote whenever they want. But then, when, for instance, we have one developer who goes completely blackout for 4 hours, and we were waiting for him, and he was supposed to be here, then we tell him. So yeah, but I would say that remote is not for everyone, and it's a tricky question because it took us some time and a lot of communication to get to this point. But at the beginning, it could be complicated.